Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wrestlenomics. I'm Brandon Thurston, joining you live and on demand from Buffalo, New York, and I'm joined by Jesse Collings. Hello, Jesse.
Hello, Brandon. I don't know why we're here today. You just said you want to do Wrestlenomics, and I said, yeah, sure. It's kind of random, but what's going on? Do you know anything happening?
Today is July 22nd, 2022, and Vince McMahon announced his retirement today from WWE. As we're scrambling here to get the slides going, to get the stream set up. Here we go. We will take questions, but we'll go through the information that we know and that I've heard. I guess we'll start here. I was around just after 4 p.m. Eastern, I believe, which sounds about right because that's when the stock market closes. Vince McMahon retires is the press release that WWE put out just after 4, with quotes from Vince McMahon. Employees got a similar message. He writes, as I approach, I don't know, I was going to do the Vince voice. As I approach 77 years old, I feel it's time for me to retire as chairman and CEO of WWE. Throughout the years, it's been a privilege to help WWE bring you joy, inspire you, thrill you, surprise you, and always entertain you. I would like to thank my family for mightily contributing to our success, and I would also like to thank all of our past and present superstars and employees for their dedication and passion for our brand. Most importantly, I would like to thank our fans for allowing us into your homes every week and being your choice of entertainment. I hold the deepest appreciation and admiration for our generations of fans all over the world who have currently like, and sometimes even love our form of sports entertainment. He goes on. Our global audience can take comfort in knowing WWE will continue to entertain you with the same fervor, dedication, and passion as always. I'm extremely confident in the continued success of WWE, and I leave our company in the capable hands of an extraordinary group of superstars, employees, and executives, in particular both Chairwoman and co-CEO Stephanie McMahon and co-CEO Nick Khan. As the majority shareholder, I will continue to support WWE in any way I can. My personal thanks to our community and business partners, shareholders, and board of directors for their guidance and support through the years, then, now, forever together. That is the press release. Brandon Ross, the Lightshed analyst who covers WWE stock, tweeted at 4:16 that Vince is fully gone from WWE as an executive. This includes his role as head of creative in addition to his CEO role. I asked WWE spokesperson, told me that is correct. We can talk about the stock. We can talk about that. Let's go. There was a meeting at 5 p.m. Eastern with all staff. It was basically just Nick Khan and Stephanie McMahon reviewing the statements that were already put out. We can go over this report from Mike Johnson, who says that they were told, PW Insider was told, that Vince McMahon's retirement decision was privately made about a week or so ago. One source told PW Insider that the final decision was made around 10 days ago. So that would be around July 12th or so. PW Insider was told that the decision was made to place Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan into the co-CEO role shortly after it was clear that McMahon would be exiting. The timing of releasing it on a Friday afternoon was obviously to blunt any negative fallout in terms of media and stockholder response. WWE closed at $66 today. PW Insider is told it was a very close circle that knew, and shockwaves are still registering within headquarters and beyond. There is a lot of shock among those in the company, especially among longtime employees. They never truly believed there would be a day where they worked without Miss McMahon. Kevin Dunn and Bruce Pritchard are the point people running tonight's SmackDown taping in Boston. New WWE co-CEO Stephanie McMahon and Triple H are both backstage at tonight's SmackDown taping, so obviously everyone is going to defer to them as well. PW Insider has not heard that Nick Khan is there. Vince McMahon was not present at all today in Boston and will not be officially involved in the creative process going forward. We are working to confirm how the creative team will work going forward. It's worth noting that there was, we'll talk about Brock Lesnar reportedly has left the building. He was previously scheduled to appear on SmackDown. There was a Paul Levesque is back press release this morning that now becomes ambiguous. announcing that Paul Levesque would be taking over overseeing talent relations from that's the role that John Laurinaitis previously had. And I just want to add too before I'll let you talk one second, Jesse. There's a number of Form 4s that came out today. They are to cover tax liability, as indicated with the code F that is on this form. It looks as if numerous W executives have made stock transactions here. These are routine stock transactions that happen every July. I know it looks suspect to happen today, coinciding with the timing of Vince McMahon announcing his retirement. But I believe that these are to cover tax liability. I mean, literally, if you read the forms, that's what they say. And this happens, I can tell you from looking at these kinds of forms for years, that this happens every July. So I don't think this is meaningful. Are you going to SmackDown tonight, Jesse?
No, Brandon, I was totally unaware WWE was actually in Boston tonight. I knew they were coming at some point, but it really wasn't until you just read that Mike Johnson report where I was like, oh, yeah, they're in Boston, aren't they? Because, I'm going to the ROH show tomorrow in Lowell, and then there's Dynamite is in Worcester on Wednesday night. But I realize now that I should probably be there, Brandon. Shouldn't I? Shouldn't I be boots on the ground? Shouldn't I be backstage trying to figure out where Brock Lesnar is or
Yes.
who's running the show? But yeah, I mean, it's funny, the Paul Levesque news dropping this morning, right? In hindsight, looks like a pretty interesting tell. But we had been hearing rumors about Paul Levesque coming, regaining some power in WWE. There was that report about how he was telling people backstage NXT that he was back, and it was, he's back in charge, and there really wasn't that much of a follow-up to it. And, the reports we got was that it's still Shawn Michaels running NXT, but he's obviously back. And, when he was announced today, my take was, okay, John Laurinaitis, who's caught up in this NDA scandal with Vince, he's gone. And that seemed to be pretty consistent reporting after the first story broke in the Wall Street Journal that John Laurinaitis is stepping away and he's unlikely to return, as opposed to Vince, where it's much more ambiguous and felt much more like Vince was just going to ride out the storm. When Paul Levesque got promoted this morning officially, my reaction was, it's really interesting that John Laurinaitis is just totally getting the axe here, while Vince McMahon, who's accused of essentially the exact same transgressions as John Laurinaitis, and a lot of other stuff that John Laurinaitis was not accused of,
more numerous,
is just going to skate.
Exactly.
And now, obviously, we have the new information, which is that it doesn't look like Vince is going to skate. I think what everyone is talking about right now is a few days ago, Vince was... Do you swear on Wrestlenomics? I want to do a direct quote.
Yes.
Okay. A few days ago, Vince McMahon was out on SmackDown right after the first Wall Street Journal story.
June 17th.
Yucking it up. Was that June 17th? It was more than a month ago. Wow, it feels like that was only a few weeks ago. But June 17th, he's out on SmackDown after the first Wall Street Journal story. He's confident. He walks backstage and he yells, "Fuck him," to everybody, apparently. And so we go from that to today, where he is now all of a sudden, I'm old and retired, and I'm 77, so I'm stepping away. See you later. What happened between now and then? And the big question is, what is still to come about this situation? Are there more details that we don't know about, that the board might be aware of, that prominent business partners might be aware of, that is about to drop? Does the Wall Street Journal have more information? There's stories about Real Sports on HBO with Brian Gumbel. That's another one that I think people are curious to know what's going to happen. Is there another big, huge bomb that's worse than anything that we've had so far about Vince yet to drop? I think that's what most people are thinking right now at this moment.
Yeah. I think it's most likely that WWE saw that it was going to be difficult for them to cooperate with business partners, and WWE has its media rights negotiations, live rights negotiations for Raw and SmackDown coming up next year, and maybe somewhat in process already. I would think that it would be more, we talked about this on Sunday, I think it would be more difficult to negotiate a favorable TV rights deal for WWE when you've got this scandal with Vince looming in the background. Who knows what else more news is still to be reported. Who knows who might come forward. and tell stories about their, interactions with Vince. We will take questions if you have any questions. I do see we have one from Danny, who asks, "What time will Kevin Dunn exit stage left?" So Kevin Dunn is the executive producer for WWE, who it has been believed, by me, and I've heard it as well, from people who have worked with them. That's the Stephanie side, and it doesn't get along with Kevin Dunn, and I think Dave Meltzer has said that the day would be years ago, but when the assumption was that Stephanie and Triple H would take over after Vince, the assumption was that as soon as they did, Kevin Dunn would be out of there. Don't know. We'll see. Who's going to be the head of creative? The press release from earlier today about Triple H being back makes him a leading candidate to me, but I would think Bruce Pritchard is in the running as well.
Yeah, well, Paul Levesque. Well, so if Paul Levesque was in the running, and he got promoted today? It's not like he got promoted like a few weeks ago. That announcement happened today. Wouldn't you think that he would be announced as the creative person? Like he's filling in Johnny Ace's role, which is as EVP of Talent Relations, which is different than a creative role. I'm sure he might have some authority in creative at the moment, but if you're WWE, wouldn't you want Triple H to be, if he was going to eventually take over that role, wouldn't you just announce today as part of Vince is retiring, Triple H is going to take up his head of creative position? I think the general public would see that as a positive step, or at least people would have more confidence in Triple H kind of taking over than the current mystery box that we don't know. Is it going to be Bruce Pritchard? Is it going to be Paul Levesque? Is it going to be Paul Heyman? Is it going to be Jeff Jarrett? There's a lot of people backstage to debate that. We've talked about this a lot on this show, Brandon, about what's going to happen when Vince is gone. I'm a firm believer in the Vince chaos theory, where now that Vince the dictator is dead, the bloody revolution to become the bloody struggle to become the next dictator has just begun, and the knives are going to be out with all of these people trying to assume control and authority over this company, and especially over the creative end of it.
Yeah. I imagine there'll be some sort of meeting that we'll hear about. We're talking right now, if people end up watching or listening to this after the fact. We're talking, it's now 6:14 p.m. Eastern. SmackDown's tonight. I imagine there'll be some sort of meeting with talent, with at least Stephanie and Triple H, and then maybe there'll be news coming out of that. Alex Sherman from CNBC has tweeted, and I wish I could put it on the screen, but I don't have it ready here. But CNBC's Alex Sherman, who also did some reporting when the Wall Street Journal story originally came out on WWE, sort of expressing skepticism. Let's see if I can find it so I can read exactly what he said. But it's understandable, especially if you reflect, and I don't know that he's even reflecting on this, if you reflect on WWE's history of things like Pat Patterson. I think Pat Patterson being, out of power, but actually still working in the background. So Alex Sherman tweeted about an hour ago, saying Vince McMahon wouldn't have anything to do with WWE because he no longer holds an executive title at the company is like saying John Malone will have nothing to do with the future of media. So could it be that Vince, and that's a question that I wanted to know right away, because we saw Vince step down as CEO and chairman of the board, but he remained head of creative. So certainly fathomable that he would step down from these executive roles while continuing to work on creative. According to WWE, according to WWE Media Relations, he's not continuing as head of creative. I think other reporters have been told that too.
It was my reaction. It was my reaction at first, when the story broke, and we got the original kind of release statement from Vince McMahon. It says he's stepping down as CEO and chairman of the board of WWE, which he had kind of basically already resigned temporarily from. He stepped down already. This was kind of like a permanent confirmation of that. And the cynic in me was just like, all right, so this doesn't actually mean he's leaving his role of creative, which I think is the much more significant role to the average wrestling fan.
We should add too, just to quickly interject here. If we go back and look at the press release that announces Vince's retirement, in particular, both chairwoman and co-CEO Stephanie McMahon, I read this sentence here to be saying Stephanie is now the permanent chairwoman of the board at WWE. That's how I understand that.
And that's how I understood it too. It really wasn't until I saw Brandon Ross, of all people, to kind of confirm that he's out of creative, which I think is the much. I mean, to the business sense, it's maybe I don't know. I don't know which role is bigger, him as CEO or and chairman of the board, or him as head of creative. I think for wrestling fans, head of creative, obviously, but it is kind of like a confirmation, I guess, that he is stepping down for a period of time. Now, does he come back? That's tough to say. It depends on the pressure. It depends on. It's too hard. It's too early to say. We don't know what these if there are more allegations coming out that finish him off for good.
Again, I think if the key to this decision is business partners were signaling that this was not going to be okay, keeping him on, it would be if that's the case, which I think is quite possible. And I think that's the strongest lever. You know, we talk about last Sunday, the hierarchy of W influence, it's Vince at the top, and right underneath that, it's business partners, most especially NBC Universal, Fox, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, people like that. If business partners are signaling that we don't feel good about this, and I think it's time for him to retire, it would be very foolish if people at WWE allowed him to continue to still actually be involved, because it would go against the very thing that their very valuable business relationships were opposed to. I would be surprised.
It would be like Dixie Carter still secretly employing Vince Russo when Spike told them not to, right? It would be the exact same thing as that. Yes. Now, something really notable to me about this is, so the NDA story comes out, the first one, June 17th, the Wall Street Journal story comes out. What happens we get the story about him stepping down as CEO or whatever. What happened that night? He went out on SmackDown and he popped a big rating, and he didn't do anything, right? He just came out and introduced John Cena, or he just did a quick introduction. And he came out and did that, and he popped a rating, and ratings went up across the board for all WWE's product, programs that week and the week after that. He milked up he milked the controversy around him for ratings. So to me, Vince McMahon's retirement, he would want to milk that for all it's worth. He should be. I have a big announcement. He should be. I haven't seen anything yet. It could change in any minute. Right. Haven't seen it. It doesn't
sound like. I believe we just read from the PW Insider report that Vince was not present at all today in Beantown and will not be officially involved in the creative process going forward. That's what he wrote.
I know. It's
so
funny.
I don't expect Vince to be on TV. I do expect the rating to be higher, just because.
Oh, I definitely do. I've heard. I mean, maybe the biggest of the year. But my point I'm making is that Vince, I think, would want to milk this. Everything we know about him would suggest that, including what he did last month, and yet he didn't. That makes me think that the business partners are uncomfortable with him being on television and are uncomfortable with his leadership. I think that's a big tell to me that Vince is just, he's gone without any pomp or circumstances or attempts to put himself on television again. That to me is
the Titus
is
thing was
notable.
very weird. Have you
in hindsight,
the Titus segment?
It was weird. It was weird on Monday, but now it's really weird.
It looked to me like it looked to me like a decision by Vince to have Titus O'Neil come out and give this very positive, hey, we love everybody message, total non sequitur to open Raw too. It sent my sense of it was like, yeah, he's still going forward. He's still steamrolling ahead, and this is a little bit of damage control. But no, I mean, and if the PW Insider report is accurate that this was a decision made around 10 days ago, then that was made well before Titus O'Neil went through the curtain on Raw. I have a question from Mr. Warren Hayes. So how meaningful is it that Vince continues to be majority shareholder? What kind of power does he keep? I believe. So Vince is the largest shareholder, and his referring to himself as the largest shareholder in the press release which is what exactly does he say here? He says, as the majority shareholder, I will continue to support WWE in any way I can. So that's indicating to me that he's letting you know he's still going to be a shareholder. I think that's sort of strategic to mention that, to say, hey, look, I'm not getting out of the company. I'm not selling my stock, or we're not selling the company to an acquirer or something like that. He's the largest shareholder. He has the majority of votes. He has about 80% of the voting power. Most obviously, that means he's going to be able to decide who the board of directors are, or he's going to be able to approve the board of directors every April. Every April, WWE has its annual shareholders meeting. I guess he could come back, but I don't. Again, as we just sort of discussed, the reasons why we don't think that's going to happen, mainly because of business partners. And if he's not an executive, and if he's not like secretly operating WWE from his yacht, I don't think he's going to have any real power if we can accept face value as face value. Do you agree with that, Jesse?
I agree with the logic that you're using, Brandon.
But this is pro wrestling.
I don't know. Maybe I'm psychologically traumatized by Vince in a way that, like, I'll never rule him totally out of the picture, and I'm wary of doing that because I don't want to be, proven wrong by how low can they sink ethically. I think the point you raised about if he was being pushed out through the business-to-business partners, which are the backbone of WWE, I think it's interesting to think that if WWE was still primarily consumer to business relationship, that Vince might not have to leave because he wouldn't be under the same kind of necessary pressure that these billion-dollar TV deals put in front of him and these other, powerful corporate partners that they have with. And so I think that if I were to, gun to my head, I would say that I would expect him to no longer be with the company going forward, but I'll never rule him out. Again, I aforementioned am the believer in the chaos theory with post Vince McMahon, and it's possible that if things are totally off the rails and they're bleeding viewers at a tremendous rate, it can easily be sold that the only person that can fix this is our current largest shareholder and the guy everyone respects, which is Vince McMahon. And that's the kind of leverage for him to come back. That's a way I can see him to come back in a way that would potentially be approved by these, cable companies that are paying WWE money. But that's just an idea.
Right. I do want to mention now something I was looking at earlier this week. We bring the slides back up here, and we'll go to. Because we have a super chat coming up from MJ, so it's a good time to bring this up. So W stock in the aftermarket trading, we should mention, is only moving a little bit as far as Google Finance is telling me. It was up less than 0.5% today, $66 a share. That's just under $5 billion in market capital. The stock price was up 30 cents today, so not much movement. After hours trading, the stock is up an additional 0.71%. So about what we see on the screen here, which is a little bit older screenshot. Somebody pointed it out to me a few days ago that there was an enormous call made on W stock to by August 19th to reach $70 per share. So basically somebody took out, to put this in layman's terms, because I had to spend a lot of time trying to understand. I still don't understand stock options, but basically what this means is somebody took out a nearly $30 million bet that by August 19th, WWE stock price will be $70. My response to this, when somebody pointed this out to me a couple days ago, was that's hard to imagine. That, especially considering the earnings call has to happen. I would think the earnings calls happen usually on Thursdays. I would think the earnings call is going to happen on August 4th, 2 Thursdays from now. I thought it was conspicuous that W still has not announced a date for their earnings call. They usually do that at least 2 weeks out. It's coming up to be time. Maybe they'll do it on August 11th. I don't know. But anyway, they're going to have to do the earnings call. And think by that time they're going to have to make a decision. We discussed, I believe, on last Sunday that W's going to make a decision within 2 weeks. And it's hard to imagine what good news would drive this stock up to $70. Maybe a next day TV rights deal, the Hulu deal, the rights for Raw and SmackDown that are currently held by Hulu, so you can watch Raw and SmackDown the next day. Maybe there's some great announcement that they have to make. Maybe they'll announce that Netflix has bought those rights, or Amazon Prime has bought those rights. And maybe that would drive a lot of optimism. But considering that Vince is retired, ostensibly, this might drive up speculation that, okay, Vince is out, maybe he'll be willing to sell now. Maybe WWE can now negotiate the acquisition of WWE, and maybe that could drive the price up. So that could happen, and that opens up a whole new can of worms of questions. Anything to add to that, Jesse, before we get to MJ's questions?
No, but I do think it's interesting that someone would gamble on that, and
yeah,
I mean, that would be, and who would the inner circle?
It looked like it all came out on one day, on the 19th, which was what, Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. Yeah. Probably one player, could be multiple though. We know at least from Mike Johnson's report that people knew for about a week. So presumably this was not, Vince McMahon's departure was not something decided today. And therefore, that information. But I would think this is probably somebody who's an institutional investor. I mean, this was like a $30 million bet. I doubt it's somebody who works for WWE. That would probably be highly illegal.
I don't think it's someone who works for WWE. I'm thinking just as far as information potentially being available, or even just rumors giving someone enough confidence to make a move like that.
I would be surprised though that if reporters did not know about this, I doubt somebody who's able to make a stock play would know about it. But yeah, okay. So we'll go to MJ from NJ, who gives us a $9.99 super chat. You're telling me Steph, who wanted to spend time with family, and Paul, who has a heart condition, are the best people to run this company going forward? How's that fly on Wall Street? He also adds, W is too valuable a property to be run by B-plus players. So thank you for the super chat. So I guess we had question from this. How will Wall Street feel about? I mean, there is Nick here as the co-CEO, and I think the notion that W stock price or W's value would decline the day that Vince isn't around is softened by the confidence that shareholders have grown for Nick Khan. I think Nick Khan gives this stock a lot of stability and reassurance that who better to negotiate favorable TV rights fees for this company than him.
And Brandon, we've already seen at least Vince stepping away what we were led to believe is temporarily during this investigation, and Vince kind of stepping away from the CEO position and Stephanie kind of taking over him. That the stock didn't really move that much. So clearly people weren't afraid from that, which obviously,
or they thought it wasn't real.
Which was foreboding of what ended up happening. So I do think that means something. As far as the difference in how it goes, I think I talked about it at the time when they had to bring Stephanie back. A week after they had kind of supposedly WWE had kind of strategically buried Stephanie in the media to make it seem like it wasn't a big deal that she was leaving, and then 1 week later were forced to install her as CEO to try to give people confidence that she was going to do a good job. I do think Nick Khan is a big swing factor here in the sense that I think that people have confidence in Nick Khan, the business person running the company. If you listen to the investor calls, Vince is obviously not going to be on this next investors call. Does that really make a difference? He doesn't really talk anymore on the investor calls.
Right.
Nick Khan is running the business side of that company and has for quite some time. the bigger question, I mean, the big question for me is creatively, and if you're an investor, do you have confidence in the creative direction of WWE leading to a successful business enterprise moving forward? Um, who knows? I think it could probably go either way.
One of the biggest questions to me is I would love to know the story behind how they convinced Vince McMahon to retire. Assuming this is as real as I think it is. I would have assumed that Vince McMahon would never voluntarily leave this company. That the day that Vince left power at WWE would be the day that he's no longer physically able to do his job. Then that's it. But here we are.
So you don't believe that he's just like, you know what, I'm 77 and getting pretty old, time to retire. You don't believe that statement?
No, I mean, I would have to think about it, and maybe they convinced him, and I think it's very plausible that WWE is not better off as a company if he's around, and it's going to hurt the value of the company. Big question. Additionally, what does Vince do now? He's still going to collect. By the way, if he's still a shareholder, which he is, he's got a third of the shares. He'll continue to get dividends. He'll still continue to make money until he sells his shares, doesn't have them anymore. He'll continue to make money from this company. I'm going to try to put up my calculator on the screen here.
Brandon, I've got the answer here. We've been
Yes.
talking about it. Who's that going to be, that third player, that third major wrestling company to emerge? You got WWE, you got AEW. Who's going to be someone with the money and the connections to make that third company happen? I know a guy who's got a lot of money and a lot of connections, and he's just became free to work. So,
yes, we also got a Tony Khan troll tweet saying he's now the longest tenured CEO in pro wrestling or something. Hashtag,
no, but
hashtag
I
AEW
actually,
Rampage.
I kind of want to talk about that for a second. I don't know if you're talking about now or you.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I just what I have on the screen here is $13.4 million is roughly the amount of money that he'll make in dividends per year because of the number of shares that he holds, 12 cents per share every quarter. I would think Vince is under a pretty heavy non-compete that would prevent that would prevent him from running a pro wrestling organization. It'll be interesting to see in probably not tomorrow, probably not over the weekend, but maybe early next week, any documents that W discloses, his separation agreement or something like that would probably confirm his non-compete. The members of the board of directors, which he was one, he was the chairman, might just be generally under a non-compete anyway. Or there might already be a non-compete that's contingent upon his exit. It comes to mind too that what we see in the proxy statement every year that comes out every spring is that we see some information related to the top 5 most compensated officers, which of course Vince is one, and it details what it would cost to terminate them with or without cause. Does this qualify as termination? I would think so. Does he get severance because of this? Maybe. And it's millions of dollars in severance that he's supposed to get, according to the proxy statement. We'll see. I would expect some SEC disclosures early next week, at least an 8K that sort of at least reasserts what the press release says. And again, it'll be very interesting to see if there's not some sort of separation agreement. But no, I wouldn't. It's fun to think about, but I wouldn't expect Vince to start up his own wrestling company. But Lord knows what he's going to do.
XFL to XFL a third time,
and somebody else owns the
starting
XFL. Yeah, the Rock and his investors and Danny Garcia, not that Dan Garcia, but his business partner and former wife. They own and they're going to run the XFL. That's starting a new season, I think, next year. It made perfect sense. It's sort of the exit plan for him when he started the XFL and relaunched it in 2020. But that didn't work out.
Maybe buy a professional sports team. Wouldn't that be wacky?
WWE just announced that they're an investor in a Premier Lacrosse League, but that's not got anything to do with Vince personally.
I'm trying to think if there are any teams for sale. I believe the Washington Nationals might be coming for sale. The Portland Trailblazers. The Portland Trailblazers were
Denver
rumored for
Broncos?
sale.
Weren't Denver Broncos?
Yeah, I think they got sold though. some of these are rumored to go for sale. Like I know the Nationals are rumored to want to sell, and I believe the Blazers were gonna be sold almost to Phil Knight, the Nike chairman, but then the widow of Paul Allen, who owns them, was like, actually, I'm not selling it. That's a whole other thing. But I don't know. It's really interesting. Wrestling is Vince's life. Are there other media projects he'd want to get behind? Maybe he wants to make a documentary about himself now that Netflix isn't going to do it. Maybe he wants to write a book. Maybe he's going to be back in charge in 6 months. I have no idea.
You know what every retired wrestling personality is great business project for them.
Ad-free shows?
He could do a podcast. Yes. Anyway, we have a $5 super chat from Dan Franks. Just says, thanks for doing this. Thanks, Dan. We have Tim B, who says, I want to mention too. I do not even read these super chats before I throw them on the screen. Lord knows what you could be saying to us if you just give us.
I've got a lot of enemies, Brandon. You got to be careful.
Okay. The Tim B says those call options after earnings and normal. We got to work on your syntax, Tim B. Those call options after earnings and normal for option traders coming up to earnings that will see calls increase in value regardless of stock dollars. I'm guessing what Tim B, thank you for the super chat, Tim B. I'm guessing what Tim B is trying to say here is that options may be happening regardless of what the business is doing. And I think that's very plausible. That may be what's happening. Chris Ely, Dr. Chris Ely, asks, how do you think Stephanie and Nick Khan will coexist? Who will be the tiebreaker if the two have a creative disagreement? That is a question that occurred to me as well this afternoon. What is the relationship like between Stephanie and Nick Khan? I believe, at least early on, that it was a good relationship. It may still be. And I think there was a time where Nick was supposed to sort of be her tutor to help her learn and become somebody who could be the CEO someday. So I will admit, the press release does say that they're going to be co-CEOs. I had not fully read the press release right away, and somebody was emailing me and asked me my thoughts on it, and like, is Nick taking over? And I replied, I don't know, I could see Stephanie and Nick being co-CEO. And lo and behold, once I finally read the press release, that's what it said. But who would be the tiebreaker? Who would be third in command now? Frank Riddick, I guess.
Well, Christine Salen? I don't know.
Christina Salen was fired in November.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But Frank Riddick is now the chief financial officer in her place.
I can't be on Wrestlenomics and not know that. That's my bad.
That's fine. I'm the only one who knows these things.
My question to respond to that one is, what do each of those individuals, Nick Khan and Stephanie, want? I kind of believe that Nick Khan doesn't really care about creative that much. It's not. I've always said that it's not his job to care about the creative direction of the company. It's his job to make business deals and to do that. I feel like he's probably always been deferential to Vince, and obviously Vince is his boss, so that makes sense. With Stephanie, I think Stephanie would probably be more hands-on with creative, especially her, because she's still married to Paul Levesque, who obviously would want to we're led to believe would want a significant creative role. And I think the way I see their relationship, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but I see this as Nick Khan being the, for lack of a better term, the brains behind the operation, the guy making the business deals, the experienced corporate navigator, the guy who can respond to all sorts of questions during the earnings call and be the guy who's driving revenue forward and has good instincts and all those kind of things. And Stephanie is around to have the McMahon last name. Yep, to have the McMahon last name, to let people know that the McMahon family is still in charge of WWE, and to make she's essentially still the CPO. She'll be making public appearances. She'll be talking about the company. She'll be winning awards. It probably behooves WWE to say that they have a female executive and a female CEO. She's probably going to be. I mean, she's presented probably as the most prominent female in sports. If you think about, like in sports management, sports leadership, right? There's no female.
She'll make many lists of top female CEOs, and she'll
correct.
She'll be
so, you know, so I can see all that happening, but I see that I don't think they're, at least from what I can tell, and I'm sure it's going to be very different. I'm sure they're going to have disagreements or whatever, but from what I can tell, it seems like they're kind of going to be operating two different aspects of the business, and how much of that is going to lead to them clashing. What I would be concerned about is somebody that's not Stephanie and not obviously not Vince getting Nick Khan's ear from a creative standpoint and trying to sell him on their vision, and that leading to clashes between the creative aspects of the company, between maybe Stephanie is hypothetically pure hypotheticals experiment here, and I'm just using this as an example, and I don't want anyone to take anything with it. Perhaps
I guess finish your point.
So hypothetical again, perhaps Stephanie is saying, I want my husband Paul Levesque, he should be the new creative person in charge. Paul Heyman goes to Nick Khan and says, I've got this idea. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do that. He's able to convince Nick Khan that his vision is the best. Then I can see them kind of fighting over something. But until then, I don't think they're really going to butt heads, because I think they have two totally different roles, despite the fact that they're sharing the title of CEO.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's going to be disagreements that most wrestling fans are going to be affected by and see. I don't know, but I could see a scenario in which Stephanie wants to keep WWE, continue to be a family-owned business that is independent, and I could see a scenario in which Nick wants to make a deal to sell WWE. Maybe. I mean, it's important to point out that Nick Khan is under a 5-year employment agreement with WWE that started in, I believe, August of 2020. That would mean that would expire in August of 2025, right? So Nick Khan may not, I mean, maybe I could see a scenario in which Stephanie just becomes the full-blown CEO in 2025. Nick is under this 5-year employment agreement that takes him past the US TV rights deal being finalized and going into effect. Nick may be here to help WWE and do a really great TV deal and do a number of other deals for WWE, and then maybe move on to whatever is the next step for him. I do believe he's a wrestling fan. I do believe he grew up as a wrestling fan. He's told the story that he was an usher at WrestleMania 9. Longtime friends with The Rock.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Nick Khan, perhaps leaving the company after the next TV deal is done. Before any of this Vince news came out, it just seemed like a likely thing to happen, because if it were to become a power struggle between Nick Khan and Stephanie has a lot more ultimate authority. She has a lot more voting power, and she's the chairwoman of the board. So she has a lot. She has a lot more control over Nick than Nick Khan does over the company. Even if Nick Khan might be more business savvy and more political than Stephanie. Stephanie ultimately has more authority, correct?
Say it again.
Stephanie McMahon has more authority than Nick Khan because she's the chairwoman of the board, correct?
I think in board decisions, but I don't think that's like day to day. The board is a very separate thing in my understanding. The board is like they meet every quarter, and I think between the quarters, and they advise. The role of the board of directors is to advise the company and to oversee the executives. It's just sort of this like sanctioning body over the company is how I understand it. When we're talking about day-to-day decisions, I don't think because Stephanie is the chairwoman that she technically, has the greater authority.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking more like grand scale. Like there's a massive power struggle, and one of them has to go.
Mm-hmm. No, I think I think there could be disagreements maybe about like major business strategy decisions that are more interesting to Wrestlenomics listeners than to the average WWE fan.
And that led to the end of George Barrios. Right, was that there was a disagreement between what to do with WWE Network, and that was
that
the end
that
of.
would be my belief, is that George Barrios and Michelle Wilson, who were the brains behind the launch of the W Network, certainly Vince approved of it, and Vince was apparently sold on the idea, but they wanted to continue to make the W Network a direct-to-consumer service, add a premium tier to it. Subscribers had stalled by 2018. It was 2020 now. Subscribers were stalled, and their idea to draw additional revenue out of the service was to create a premium tier, maybe $15 a month or whatever. Vince wanted to go a different way, and we've never gotten anybody on the record talking about why they left, but he decided to let them go in January of 2020, and to not continue with the W Network as a direct-to-consumer service, but to license the rights to that content to a major streamer as the streaming wars were ramping up. That ended up in Nick Khan coming in and selling those rights to Peacock. We have another question here from Jermaine Pope, who writes, Vince did what was best for business, right? Any hint of Vince returning may break the faith in the business partners, and investors may decide to do business elsewhere. I would generally agree with that sentiment. If there's a Vince Russo situation happening here, and one day somebody had is there a reporter who has like the same first name as?
I was gonna ask who is what are the names of the people who would run either NBCU or.
So what we're thinking about here is that somebody, Vince Russo himself, right? Was meaning to email Mike Tenay notes for commentary. Vince Russo was not supposed to be involved in creative at TNA anymore. He was writing notes to send to commentator Mike Tenay, accidentally sent it to wrestling reporter Mike Johnson. I don't know that there would have to be a commentator with the same first name anyway.
Well, the head of Fox Sports is Eric Shanks, and the head of NBC Universal is Jeff Shell. So I'm trying to think of any wrestling members that might be named Jeff or Eric that might be receiving an email by accident.
Sure. So the other thing I would like to touch on, I think we're good with super chats for now. Again, if you want to send a super chat in, feel free. I think big question is this good for WWE on balance? I feel like we talked about that quite a bit, but once we get through that, I have another part to this question. Is this good for WWE having Vince McMahon? Not what is the stock price going to do, not what are investors going to do. That's all perception and speculation about what is this company worth. But is this good for the business of WWE? Not just what Wall Street in the short term thinks it's worth, but is this good for business relationships, which are more important than fan relationships? But is this good for those and for WWE's popularity with fans and as a business as a whole?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack with that question. One thing I've been wondering about is how much of WWE's fan base are people who have a lot of faith in Vince McMahon and Vince McMahon's ability to present a wrestling product. And if he were to be publicly removed from his position of power, which has now happened, will people who were previously very loyal to WWE allow their interest to wane? And maybe they were already drifting away from the product, and now they're like, you know what, now that Vince is gone, I don't want to watch this anymore. That occurred to me today when I was thinking about...
What percentage of fans do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know how many of them exist, to be honest, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was a significant enough contingent, let's say 3 to 5% of fans who are loyal Monday Night Raw, Friday Night SmackDown viewers who maybe have been watching out of habit and maybe have already been drifting kind of away from the product. This gives them a kind of push out the door where they're like, you know what? I don't like this anymore. I think I'm done. And because they're going to leave with Vince. I think that's something that might happen. Who knows?
I think like the percentage of people who are paying attention to that, especially on WWE scale, and considering the fact that Vince is so rarely an on-screen figure for them, he's so much behind the scenes, especially in recent years. He's so much somebody who's behind the scenes. It's not as if he's hosting the show in addition to being the head of creative. So I think it's largely opaque, if that's the right word, to the majority of wrestling fans. I think this will largely be a good thing for WWE. I'm very skeptical. I've been skeptical for years that that Vince is really adding much on balance to this company. I think AEW exists because of Vince McMahon's performance as head of creative. He disenfranchised a large number of fans and created that opportunity. Yes, that opportunity was available partly because of the growing value in live sports rights. That was one necessary condition. The talent being available at that time was a necessary condition. By the way, that talent was available and not excited to urgently go to WWE because they knew the creative sucks at WWE, and we don't want to deal with being booked by Vince McMahon. WWE's popularity, I've demonstrated here. There's a video on this YouTube channel about it. WWE's popularity from 2017 to 2020, 2021 annually declined each year. Not just because of the pandemic, but it was declining each year leading up to the pandemic year of 2020. Ticket sales were down. WWE Network subscribers stalled while the rest of the streaming market grew. Web search was down. In some of those years, TV ratings underperformed, did worse than the decline in TV generally. Ticket sales, merchandise sales declined in annual years. Product licensing sales declined in annual years. In those years between 2017 and 2020 or 2021. The pandemic and losing fans doesn't help, but that was happening well before that. And I don't think it's that complicated. That there's an argument against what I'm saying, that it's not just Vince. You can't just scapegoat Vince. There's a lot of other things going on. But I think that it's pretty simple as that. If Triple H ends up being the head of creative, not immediately, perhaps, but gradually, a lot of the things that make people not want to watch WWE are going to fade away. And I think Triple H, Paul Levesque, I think it's an important experiment that was conducted from about 2014 to 2018 before the NXT show went to the USA Network. Largely during that time that I just mentioned, that WWE's popularity declined, there's one part of WWE that grew in popularity. Now, I don't know that you could argue that it was profitable, especially when you add the Performance Center cost in there. But Triple H built a brand that grew in popularity in large part because it was an alternative to the main roster that many fans weren't happy with. But I think he demonstrated that he could be an effective head of creative. Now, I would probably argue that he hit a wall around the time that NXT went to the USA Network. But I think that's
around the time another alternative emerged on the mainstream level.
Definitely. And I think that shows that he can probably be a competent head of creative. And I think it shows that a different creative vision was within the WWE system could be effective, while the other creative vision on the main roster, led by Vince McMahon, with its superior reach, platforms, was not. It was still obviously far more effective, but was far more popular, but was less effective and declined in popularity. I think there's that. More importantly than any of this, somebody who is allegedly having sexual relationships with employees and maybe sexually harassing others is no longer in charge of WB. that's a good thing, especially if those allegations are true, as alleged.
It also shows that those actions have consequences, even if you're the most powerful person in the company.
Yeah. I think a lot of the problems in pro wrestling with its perception come down to Vince's desire to repair the facade that is that W has, but not to actually change at its core. He wants to improve the CPMs, the ad value. They'll do campaigns and they'll want to reimagine the way that people perceive WWE. He'll want to relanguage everything, realizing that there's a problem with the term pro wrestling and what people think of when they think of pro wrestling. So he'll call it sports entertainment or just refer to the brand, the initials WWE. He wants to change the packaging, but he's never been able to change the core of what pro wrestling is. And it continues to be, his product continues to be something that is sophomoric, and there's a lot of gross out humor and just stories that don't really captivate people. I think we have a lot of people in the online fan world who are really into certain personalities, despite all of what I think are really basic mistakes and bad habits as a head of creative.
I think there's a lot going on here. I fundamentally agree in the sense that pretty much anybody who could be put in charge of the head of creative could do a better job than Vince McMahon in a lot of ways. With that being said, WWE has fallen so far, and they have lost so many fans over the last 5 years or so, as you pointed out, with their consistent declines. How much damage has been done with them, and how quickly can you get those people back? And the most important thing is, how quickly can you ensure the trust in that fan base that you're going to do the right thing that satisfies them? And that's something that has eroded with years and years, due to years and years of neglect, years and years of dismissing the fans' complaints, concerns. All of that stuff has eroded this fan trust, and I don't know how quickly you get that back beyond just the move of somebody new coming in charge. I've kind of been in the belief that somebody really talented,
take years probably.
Yeah, I've always been the belief that you can't just replace Vince with anybody. You got to replace him with somebody really talented who has a really strong vision for the kind of wrestling product that they want to present. And they're going to need a lot of time to kind of get that over, because I do think there's a lot of trust that's been eroded. I think the absence of Vince immediately will provide some relief. I've heard from people today that haven't watched in years saying, "Oh my God, I can finally watch WWE again." Over the long term, if the product is like 90% the same as it was before Vince when it was under Vince, I don't really see those people sticking around. I still think it's going to be wrong. I wonder. We talk about WWE brainworms, right? We talk about people who are obsessed with the WWE mind of thinking things, and even people who should maybe know better still default to kind of the typical WWE practice, which is the typical Vince practice of how things should be done. And I wonder
I think that's had tremendous downstream effect too to other promotions who just think that. And
absolutely.
People who just worked there for a long time, they think that what they experienced there, and they had some success despite doing what they did, but they just think that some of the things that are normal in WWE are just what should happen. And Lord knows I experienced this a lot on the indies, where we had all sorts of WWE habitual things happening that we just sort of emulated WWE to do because we figured if they did it, they must be right.
Correct. And so we have that kind of attitude. Are the people that are going to be in charge creatively with WWE, are they going to have like these radically different ideas than that? No, I mean, okay, Paul Levesque was less. It's funny because I was talking to Adam Berger today on Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, my podcast. We finished recording and uploaded it right about 4:00, and then the news dropped. It was unbelievably bad timing, but it was somewhat perceptive in our conversation about what we were talking about, kind of what it's going to be like with WWE without Vince. And, that kind of Triple H is less, he's more open-minded about who can be a top star. I think we can agree with that, right? He's not going to see Adam Cole and be like, hey, man, you have to be a manager because you're too small to be a star. Or at least that's what we're led to believe in NXT, correct?
This thought pops into my head. I think MJF's stock just went up.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of AEW wrestlers. I think it's more, from what we know, I think it's going to be more appealing for some AEW wrestlers to be, at least, even if it's not that different, to be convinced that it is. If we can say, no, Vince is gone, it's going to be different. We know you might have been hesitant before, but now, here you go. But, I mean, I think MJF would have gotten a very big offer.
I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, I saw the quote the other day from, like, Road Dogg saying, I think Vince would just make him a manager. And that sounds about right to me. But that's not a roadblock anymore.
If we believe that but that's only if we believe that the people who are in charge are going to feel radically different than Vince did about what is a good wrestling product is. The people who are in charge are very likely to believe in heavily scripted promos and believe in, micromanaging the talent. We've seen the reforms that NXT has done, with Shawn Michaels running the show and everything like that. It's very rigid. Got to make sure they don't learn any of that indie shit, like just making sure that people who have any sort of instincts outside of what they teach the Performance Center, that gets hammered out of them. Yeah. I'm really skeptical that we're going to see like a serious philosophical change in the way the company presents its product without Vince.
I think a lot of that will depend on does Kevin Dunn remain in his role long term? We're still going to see a ton of camera cuts and camera shaking and a lot of the production elements that some people don't like. I think another question is, I mean, I don't, to your point, I don't see Michael Cole disavowing everything that he's learned from Vince overnight. The commentary with people doing, think of what are some of the quirks of WWE commentary. Tag, and you have to. I mean, it's good to do the pinfall count.
Watch the former. What's his name? I'm sorry, I forget his name. Todd Phillips, but he's not.
There you go.
He has the different name in Impact. He still does a lot of the WWE commentary isms, like the tag, even though he's no longer.
All that.
Yeah, even though he's no longer, being produced by Vince, because that's how he was taught, and that's how a lot of these people were taught. I know, like Bruce Pritchard has experience outside of WWE, but he's also been Vince's guy for a long time.
And what kind of content did he produce when he was in TNA?
Yeah, similar content to what WWE produces. Paul Levesque, another guy who at least expressed interest in outside ideas, and obviously through NXT was cool with not erasing history and acknowledging things and building a whole stable around former Ring of Honor talent and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, who taught him the pro wrestling business? Where has he learned the pro wrestling business, and who has he learned it from? His father-in-law, Vince McMahon. And so all of these people, I'm skeptical that they're going to change. I have another aspect of this is, okay, let's look at WCW, right? One of the main reasons the WCW's undoing was that the person who was in charge of creative did not ultimately have authority over the company. Whether it was Eric Bischoff or Vince Russo or the various other people who were put in charge in 1999 and 2000, it was all kind of a game to see who could curry favor with, Time Warner, and who could, or Turner, I guess, before Time Warner, and who could kind of manage that. In TNA, similar kind of thing. It was all about kind of who could please Dixie Carter and who can, obviously Vince Russo is very good at manipulating Dixie Carter into going in with his ideas. Always kind of power struggle over people. WWE, for as incompetent as it has been in a lot of ways, Vince wielding the kind of simultaneous authority as head of creative and in charge of the company totally gives him absolute power and absolute authority, which allows for a singular vision that kind of cuts through a lot of typical wrestling politics. Another, like, and if you don't believe, okay, WCW is one example, TNA is another example. Look what's happened with CMLL. Look what happens with Pro Wrestling Noah. Look what's happened with All Japan Pro Wrestling, right? We see all over the place.
The exception to that, I guess, would be Gato.
The exception to that, right, Gato as far as, like, but even then there's, New Japan hasn't had the cleanest history of management at the same time. I would look at, okay, what makes AEW I think kind of the kind of quality that it is, at least, is because Tony Khan, like Vince McMahon, runs creative, has complete control over the company. So that allows for a singular vision, which is Tony's vision, which some people are going to say they don't like, but I think we can agree has been very successful in attracting new fans and building a successful business model over the first 3 years or so of the company. And I do wonder if we move beyond Vince McMahon's role of creative, whether it's Paul Levesque, whether it's Bruce Pritchard, whether it's Paul Heyman, whether it's anyone else who's kind of taken the reins creatively, now that Vince, that singular entity that controls both aspects of the company, has kind of been removed, and it's going to be replaced with kind of two people, like a Nick Khan-like figure who runs the company from a business side and a wrestling guy who knows the creative side of it. Do they wield that same kind of authority to keep everything on track and to kind of avoid a lot of the potholes of wrestling politicking that we've seen ruin a ton of wrestling companies? And there's a lot of snakes in WWE, so it's not necessarily like it's going to be clean sailing, right through.
I guess we could say this, that Stephanie's going to be the co-CEO, and Stephanie and Triple H are married. Maybe that makes it more inevitable, if he's not right away, that Paul Levesque ends up being the head of creative for the main roster.
If his health permits, which is another major question.
Sure. And I think about just what you were saying earlier, I guess, about whether W will really change or not. And Triple H has learned a lot from Vince. I'm sure he would honestly say that he has. I think the relationship between those two has probably been pretty complicated, especially over the last few years. And I think he does have a pretty different vision of pro wrestling. But I agree. It will be at least a very gradual process. And but at least I feel like now, if Vince is truly out of power in pro wrestling, that at least we don't have this sort of top-down education that this is what pro wrestling should be like. At least it may take years, maybe even decades, for all that stuff to sort of cycle out. But at least now it can happen. And that, I believe, can only be good for W's business. Another question. Second part of my question. What does this mean for AEW, if anything?
Well, Tony Khan's very happy about it.
You say that because of his tweet. What did he tweet?
Yes.
He tweeted something. If whoever can find it first here.
I'm sure everyone listening to this has seen it.
Yeah. He, of course, hashtagged AEW Rampage. He frequently tweets things on Friday night with hashtag AEW Rampage. Thanks to all you wrestling fans and your great support of AEW. I'm grateful to now be the longest tenured CEO in pro wrestling. Thank you very much to every single person who watches AEW on TV, and then he plugs Rampage for tonight. He's just troll tweeting, and he likes to get the hashtag in there, I think.
He's supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. What do I think our friend Andrew Rich said? You can take the man out of the message board, but you can't take the message board out of the man. Is this a good thing for AEW or not? Do you have an opinion about that before I weigh in?
I think it depends on your last question, which is if this is a good thing for WWE or not, long term.
Okay, so I think with TV rights coming up,
yeah,
the more immediate thing that we can say. I think you're thinking about this as a long-term popularity of the brand's question, just like in a strategic media sense. Perhaps there were media companies that didn't want to deal with WWE because of this Wall Street Journal story, and maybe other things. Maybe those companies now, maybe in light of that, some of those companies were maybe more willing to talk to AEW because they felt. I mean, you could. Maybe Fox, for example. I have no information about this. I'm merely speculating. Maybe Fox was sort of thinking about whether or not they wanted to renew SmackDown. And if they weren't going to renew SmackDown, maybe it was more realistic to think about buying rights to an AEW program. whether that's on Fox broadcast or maybe whether that's on FS1, whatever. I mean, just because I say Fox doesn't mean it has to be on the Fox broadcast network. So maybe something like that was happening. Maybe other companies as well, who were thinking about negotiating with WWE, but were a little reticent because of this scandal. If Vince is removed, okay, they're relieved, and maybe now they can pursue WWE with more confidence again. In the short term, there's that aspect. In the long term, I guess it depends on what I just said. I think we've got a more competitive future ahead of us for pro wrestling in a lot of ways, which in many ways is good for fans and good for talent.
It depends on how the succession plan works out. I can totally see if there's if there's more controversies and scandals to come from WWE, and I do not think we're out of the woods yet on that end. And I think maybe Vince's retirement on the Friday news dump is indicative of something bigger coming, as I said at the top of this program. What I would suggest is, if that succession plan is a mess, and if WWE has these warring factions and no one's quite sure how to proceed, and if they, I don't know if they lose viewers, they gain viewers, doesn't matter. If they show instability, and one thing Vince McMahon has provided throughout his life as a promoter is stability. I'll give him credit for the point, though, which is him saying that Tony Khan can be looking at this and saying, okay, WWE's this, this post-Vince kind of mess. I'm over here, I have the stability. I'm the owner. I run creative. We've done, there's plenty of metrics you can point to show growth and things like that. We're the number one show on Wednesday nights. You gain some ground in the credibility argument versus you in WWE. It was always going to be difficult for AEW to come in and say, we're just as good as WWE. We're just as, you're just as good of investment. We're just as good of investment as you are WWE, because WWE's been around for decades and decades and will probably continue to be around for decades and decades. But you at least remove Vince McMahon and the stability that Vince McMahon provides from a vision standpoint and from a symbolic standpoint. It does close that gap between WWE and AEW from which company is more reliable for me to give a television deal to. And I think the other aspect of Tony's tweet that I think should be considered is, we don't know anything about Tony's relationship with Vince McMahon. We don't really know anything about Tony's relationship with WWE. There's plenty of rumors and scuttlebutt about the different, and some of it you can prove, the different things that WWE has tried to do to kind of kill AEW in the crib. The man is not going to be beyond a victory lap when he sees this happening, based on probably the experience he's had dealing with Vince McMahon and dealing with WWE since he's tried to start his company.
Right. You already tweeted this, retweeted this tweet from.
I believe I have.
So this is from Trevor Dame on Twitter, who says, whenever people say that the quote-unquote wrestling media is too hard on the industry, remember this day. The whole of the wrestling media covered Vince for decades, and he suffered nary a scratch. The Wall Street Journal writes 2 articles, and he's done. That's partly an indictment of them, I think he means the wrestling media, but also, to be fair, I think if Meltzer had ever been like, I have discovered Vince McMahon murdered an entire little league team, here is proof, I think the general public would have been like, sure he did, Dave. I'm not reading that tiny font. Is he right?
But we talked about this, Brandon, that the whole NDA scandal was going to be made or break on how the mainstream media covers it. Wrestling websites and wrestling journalists have been saying that Vince McMahon is a shady character and done some unsavory things for decades. It really, and if Dave Meltzer reported that NDA story and it wasn't covered in the Wall Street Journal, I don't think we're having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
And I think, or Sean Ross Sapp, pick your wrestling, your dirt sheet reporter, whatever you want to call them. It totally comes down to the mainstream media. It totally comes down to, the things like the Variety, writing an op-ed about it and how they're covered. And I mean, I was kind of disappointed by a lot of the coverage, but at the same time, I think it clearly played a role in this decision happening. And I think
it's really difficult for at least some. I think it's a different thing because let's think about how this story unraveled. Um, Wall Street Journal has sources. Maybe I don't like to speculate about people's sources, but maybe they had a source from the board of directors. Um, it's easier to get people like that to talk. I would think you can weigh in on this. You would know better. It's easier to get people like that to talk when you could say, "I'm so and so from the Wall Street Journal," as opposed to, I'm Dave from the Observer. I'm Sean from Fightful. Um,
Yeah, I mean, in theory, it all depends. Well, I'd say it's yes and no, because sometimes if you're a bigger, more credible outlet, people are more afraid to talk to you, as opposed to a smaller outlet that maybe you have a relationship with prior, right? If Dave Meltzer or Sean Ross Sapp or Mike Johnson or whoever, Wade Keller, um, John Pollock, the whoever they are, they might have long-standing relationships with sources, so they're more likely to kind of go on the record, or maybe not go on the record, but at least tell you what's going on, as opposed to someone else blowing in for this from a major news source that everybody recognizes and presenting that. So I think it can vary from person to person, but I definitely think there's an advantage to being the Wall Street Journal. And especially when you're on the board of a major a prominent corporation and a publicly traded company, I think there's credibility there that probably helps you get information.
yeah, I guess I think the wrestling media as it was on in June 2022 would not inspire the confidence of media executives who may be on the W board of directors. I don't think the connections aren't there, and the trust and isn't there. The awareness is probably not even there to go to wrestling media for that. And just sort of like if this was, and I'm totally speculating here again, if somebody on the board of directors was like, this needs to get out, and I feel like I need to make this public, what's the best way to do that? To go to the wrestling media, or to go to a big outlet like the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If I was them, I mean, I would look at. There's a medium too. There's a medium. Struggling here. There's a medium here where there's people like ESPN who are a major mainstream news outlet, but also dabble in wrestling coverage.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think from my perspective, there isn't a better, more credible source, perhaps, to run that story than the Wall Street Journal. I think that might be one of the reasons the New York Magazine story with Rita Cheriton didn't get the same kind of credit. That didn't get the same kind of run with the other mainstream media sources that the Wall Street Journal articles did, because the Wall Street Journal has a level of credibility. I believe it's the most subscribed to newspaper in the country. It might not be anymore, but they might have been surpassed by the New York Times, the Washington Post. But it was always it's top shelf when it comes to popularity and historical credibility, which is important for people to take it seriously, and the right kind of people to take it seriously. Right, your NBCU executive that has a Wall Street Journal account that is pulling up it on their app, and they're saying, "Whoa, Vince, what's this?" And they're probably not pulling up the Observer, or they're not going to WrestlingInc.com and, "Whoa, what's this?"
Right. So we have this super chat from Chewy Thompson. I feel like Cena is going to replace Brock at SummerSlam. What do you guys think about that? I don't have any information about it, of course, but could be. I don't know. I wonder if the Vince scandal played into whether or not Cena wanted to agree to appear at SummerSlam.
It seems just. Well, we also have the story about Vince McMahon taking a flight to Vancouver a couple of weeks ago to talk to John Cena, and what was that about?
He's doing a movie. So
right.
Maybe that was a subject of conversation there.
I always thought it was weird that Cena came back, he did the 20th anniversary. The reports leading up to that 20th anniversary appearance made it seem like John Cena. They're getting ready to start a program for John Cena to be at SummerSlam, and he even hinted as much in his promo. And then nothing since. And it seems unlikely he's going to be at SummerSlam other than as a last-second replacement. SmackDown's in Boston tonight, so there's that. But I believe he's still in Vancouver.
Is there going to be a post SmackDown media scrum?
I'm going to guess no.
With questions with Stephanie and Nick taking questions from the media.
yeah, I mean, again, I don't know any local media that would even be at SmackDown because I think I'm led to believe that Justin Barrasso was out of state and he would be my go-to source
That's
for
right.
that.
Right.
Um,
We have MJ from
uh,
NJ's. Go ahead. What?
I just want to say one thing about the Brock at SummerSlam. I mean, it is relevant that Brock apparently stormed out of WWE the meeting as I'm a Vince guy and if he's not here, I'm not here. Whatever happened. I mean, that does. We talked about is this a good thing or a bad thing for WWE? I think we can agree that Brock Lesnar being in WWE is something that's beneficial to their business. And if there are other people in WWE who are really loyal to Vince and have a lot of trust in Vince stepping down and this kind of thing happening is probably not a positive for the company. Maybe in the long term it's a benefit because you won't have Vince alienating people in the same way. You can make an argument that whatever's happening with Sasha Banks and Naomi may be rectified with Vince's departure. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it's worth considering as a possibility. Yeah. But if they were trying to sell
reapproach Sasha Banks and say, "Hey, it's a whole new world now,"
yeah,
things
I don't know if she'll believe it.
Right.
I mean, it's again. If I'm NBCU, am I psyched that Brock Lesnar is apparently not going to be on SummerSlam, and I'm paying $1 billion for this, these premium live events in your second or
we
third
don't know,
biggest...
by the way, that he's not going to be on SummerSlam. He has
we don't.
Left the venue at SmackDown. I tend to think that Brock is a temperamental guy, and now there's uncertainty about what he's doing tonight. So he said, "Screw this, I'm going home."
Yeah. So he maybe he's there. But if we hypothetically go with the idea that he's off SummerSlam, it's not obviously a good thing if NBC's paying for these pay-per-views, these premium live events, and they'll and Brock, who's a big star, is off it one week before you're supposed to do that show. That's obviously not something that I feel really confident about. I mean, that's funny. That would be like the biggest story in the world if Vince didn't step down. That Brock just stormed out and he's maybe not going to be at SummerSlam, but it's kind of a footnote at the moment.
Yeah. So we'll go to MJ's. I don't know if it's a question or a comment or just a troll. He says, "Say Cody's name. He only led AEW banner for fans." Not sure if this is a totally intelligible sentence from MJ but Cody Rhodes is in WWE now, and I could see part of the reason why Cody was attracted to go to WWE and to leave AEW was because maybe he could eventually get into some sort of executive position or some sort of position. Right? I understand that he enjoyed mentoring talent,
and one of those things was that. If you believe that Cody Rhodes left AEW because he was frustrated about his lack of control over his character and his lack of say in creative, and perhaps that his control of creative waned over the time he was in AEW from the beginning to his last match, it seemed absurd that he would get that kind of authority in WWE given Vince McMahon's ability to micromanage and control things, but now that there is perhaps a power vacuum, it wouldn't surprise me if Cody Rhodes was able to get some sort of authority. If he's a politician, he can play the game. I guess that's an unintended pun, but he can play the game and he can find himself a seat of authority, a seat somewhere creatively.
Oh, we have another super chat here. This is from Chris Ely. How fast do you think we will see changes to W Translate to TV? Not immediately, certainly not tonight. It's very difficult to say. I would say, is Kevin Dunn going to continue to be, working in his current role by next week? I have no idea. Things like that will be what matter.
Yeah, and it's possible that they string together like some shows that maybe feel a little bit different, and maybe people expect them to feel different, so they appear to be a little bit different, and then they kind of go back to being relatively normal. It'll take time for us to even be aware of like changes because you can't just watch one show and determine changes. Although, wouldn't it be funny if tonight like the show's just totally different? They're using the term wrestling, and like the characters are different, and no one's being micromanaged. Just like 180 complete difference from what people would normally see. That
So
would be
Stephanie has or I don't know if she has. WWE has tweeted that Stephanie will be opening SmackDown. Stephanie is kicking off the show, is what the WWE Twitter account has tweeted.
I mean, that's a ploy for ratings.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
And it's not Vince coming out.
She'll just recite the W signature now then, forever together.
Then yeah, that would be. I mean,
Will she allude to the fact that Vince is? I think she will allude to, or at least reference. I mean, why not? Because you can talk about him retiring without talking about sexual harassment or sexual misconduct.
I think that. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. That would be really telling if she doesn't, right? If she doesn't say like.
She can make it sound like he just retired. He decided it was time, and he's so great, and he did all these great things for you. And
I'd be interested in knowing what if she doesn't mention him at all. I mean, it wouldn't be.
You gotta tune in now.
They would. I gotta get there. I'm sure I can get a ticket.
Get down there.
Yeah, I'm sure I can get a ticket. 30 minutes. I probably live like 15 minutes away from the Garden at the moment.
I'm supposed to be covering for Wrestletix this weekend.
Mr.
Wrestletix. Mr. Wrestletix is out of town.
That's serious. You are.
So Mr. Wrestletix is out of town, and I can exclusively report that as of the middle of today, the Arthur Ashe show, which started its general on sale today, appeared to be around 9,000 distributed for Arthur Ashe in the first day of general on sale, which would be well under where it was the first time around after the same amount of time, which I think it crossed like 12,000 in the first day last year. But yeah, I need to be covering the ticket map for SmackDown in Boston, but that'll be open probably a little bit into the show. So there's time.
Yeah,
I was off the map.
That's funny. I was wondering. I was like, I said this earlier today to on I don't know if I said it on the air, but I said WrestleTix took a bad weekend to go on vacation because we had Arthur Ashe show. I was talking about the potential Death Before Dishonor attendance that's happening this weekend.
He's covering. He's taking care of that. It's a manual count or something.
But I said this is I said like a bad week for WrestleTix to go on vacation. I didn't know that he had recruited you as a substitute. Yeah,
and the Buffalo show, I don't have it in front of me. The Buffalo show has a few thousand out. No, I am not WrestleTix. WrestleTix is a totally different person. And after just experimenting with what he does all the time, there's no way one person could do what I do and do what he does. So, do you have anything else to add here? I think we've gone through all the super chats. In other talks I've done about this, I've mentioned, this is one of the biggest, just before today, just the scandal part this is one of the biggest stories that I've ever covered, ever been a part of wrestling media for, and it's only bigger now, I guess. This is one of the biggest stories in a long time, at least.
If you were to ask people at the start of this year, what do you think what's the biggest potential story that wrestling could have that's conceivable? The answer would probably be Vince McMahon dying, but the implication would be Vince McMahon somehow losing power in WWE, and it appears to have happened. So it's the biggest story. It's the biggest conceivable story you can really think of. We're going to probably look back on this and say we knew very little when we did this because it's breaking news audio and that kind of thing. It'll be really interesting to see how different people handle the coverage of this from a media standpoint. I would really, really caution anybody who's ready to have this big glowing eulogy about Vince McMahon to maybe temper that a little bit because we still don't know all the details about the NDAs and the potential other things that could be unpacked that maybe have led to this decision. So I don't think we're totally done understanding. We won't be able to understand Vince McMahon's legacy for a very long time, and we all have our opinions on it, but it'll be hard to really comprehend what he really meant to the professional wrestling world until quite a while from now.
Yeah, the Fightful reporting that Bruce Pritchard is, at least for now, taking over Vince McMahon's television duties and moving forward. So he's Sean's got some more details there. I don't want to just regurgitate.
Yeah, I
them
think
on my stream.
that's what most people would expect in the immediate aftermath, is that Bruce, who kind of already is technically in head of like television. I mean, that's how it's presented, is that Vince was the head of, Bruce was in charge of kind of writing the shows and stuff like that. And Vince is the guy at the top, okaying things, making suggestions, giving the final approval. But Bruce is kind of the day-to-day guy coming up with a lot of this content that we're seeing. So I think it would make sense for, at least in the absolute immediate aftermath of Vince stepping down, that Bruce is in charge. I wonder how long will that last? That's the major question I think a lot of people are asking.
Right. I mean, and it's worth noting in 2008, Bruce Pritchard left WWE because he was fired by Stephanie. He's told that story, which you can find on his podcast, and there's a clip of it on YouTube if you search for, the obvious search terms. I have no idea what the relationship is like between Bruce Pritchard and Stephanie, but yeah, it makes it more likely to me that maybe Bruce does not stay in that position for long, and that why wouldn't her husband be in that position if he wants to be?
Well, I'd ask, why wasn't he given a creative position today? Why is he now VP of talent relations? Why does he have a completely different job?
Right, and if this was known 10 days in advance, which is what PW Insider is reporting, then they would have known that he was going to retire today.
Yeah, and I think you would instill more confidence in the fan base by saying, "Hey, Triple H is in charge now." So maybe that's part of a larger power struggle. Not sure, but definitely, you're going to be back on Sunday, right?
Yes, we'll be back on Sunday. You'll be joining us, correct?
The plan is for me to enjoy us. It will depend on whether or not I get out of the Death Before Dishonor media scrum alive.
Yes. You're going to be doing media for Ring of Honor tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Lowell, Massachusetts.
Yes. In Lowell, Massachusetts, there is going to be a media scrum. I will be at it representing Wrestlenomics. So that'll be fun. That'll be a good time. Very excited to be in the media scrum, and I'll be very interested in seeing, like I said, how many media is actually going to be there, and how many questions I'm allowed to ask.
Yeah. So we'll talk about whatever else we learn between now and Sunday. That's Sunday, every Sunday. There's probably a lot of people listening and watching right now who are new. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, we do Wrestlenomics Radio. That's live on YouTube, but you can also find it in audio on any podcast app by searching for Wrestlenomics Radio. We will be joined by Jesse and myself and Chris Gullo. We'll talk about whatever we've learned between now and then about this Vince McMahon story. We will talk about Jesse's experience at Ring of Honor. We'll talk about the media conference call ahead of the Ring of Honor show, the scrum, whatever happens in the scrum, whatever promo Tony Khan cuts after the show is over with, and we'll probably talk about some ticket sales as well, and whatever else is relevant. So thanks everybody for joining us for a big story today. Thanks everybody for your super chats, and we will see you on Sunday.